Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. The BBC is being urged to give urgent answers as questions continue over the Dyson report and the corporation's interview with Princess Diana. MPs from the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee said they want to know why Martin Bashir was rehired in 2016. The broadcasting regulator, Ofcom, announced it would now hold talks with the corporation. Prince William, meanwhile, has resumed his duties with a visit to Scotland. Laura Bundock reports.
His attack on the BBC was blistering, but Prince William's back on royal duties at the start of a tour of Scotland. The strength of his statement, though, will resonate for some time. The Dyson inquiry exposed lies, deceit and cover-up, and a management that believed the guilty and failed the innocent, including the whistleblower who first spoke out. He's Matt Wiesler, the graphic designer asked to make fake documents.
As weeks and months went on, I went up the ladder. I went to see head of programs, and then I went to see, people beyond that. I never saw Tony Hall, actually, but I never got an answer. I mean, it was literally like I was the guy that pointed out the flaw in something really beautiful, which is a scoop. And I pointed out that there was something not right. And all they could think of doing was turning their back on me.
These are some of the key players. Tim Souter was a BBC executive. He's now resigned from the board of Ofcom. Lord Hall was the BBC's Director General from 2013 until last year. And Martin Bashir had a high-profile career before returning to the BBC as a religious affairs correspondent. He recently stepped down due to poor health.
It is curious that they all seem to fail at about the same time. And I think what emerges from Dyson is the possibility that there was, how can I put it gently, an understanding by the BBC editorial executives within the chain not to let the truth come out.
That truth is now out. But although the inquiry answers some questions, it raises many more. Just how far up the chain of command did knowledge of the interview go? How and why did the BBC's Board of Governors accept Matt Wiesler as a scapegoat in 1996? And why did the BBC rehire Martin Bashir in 2016? They're all difficult questions. One former BBC manager says the current criticism goes too far.
I think it's damaged the BBC, no doubt at all about that. But I'm not sure it's an existential crisis for the BBC. There are some critics of the BBC, people who are now lecturing the BBC on its editorial ethics. Maybe just one or two of them should be taking a hard look in the mirror.
This definitely isn't over. The BBC's been damaged, and some want a second, more detailed inquiry if the BBC's to renew trust and restore its reputation. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Also this morning, it's set to be a landmark day for the vaccine programme in England. Anyone aged over 32 has been invited to book for their jab, and the NHS is expecting to pass 50 million vaccines. Well, Aisha Zahid joins me now from the newsroom. The vaccination programme has been hailed a success, and this even further proof that it's doing very well.
Yeah, it's definitely good news in what has been the NHS's largest and most successful vaccination drive in history. Now, as you said today, 32 and 33-year-olds will be eligible to book in for their first dose. That's around 1.1 million people that will be invited to come forward for that first jab. And it comes alongside another milestone moment. Today in England, vaccinations are expected to pass that 50 million mark when it comes to the first and second doses being administered. That means in England, more than 4 in 10 adults will be fully vaccinated and have maximum protection against the virus. And of course, while this is good news, there is still, as ever, the need for caution ahead. There are concerns over the Indian variant. We've seen cases of the Indian variant rise by 161% within a week. And today at the Office for National Statistics, have also said that there are early signs that there could be a potential increase in positive cases of COVID-19 in England. Now, the numbers show that 1 in 1,110 people tested positive for COVID-19 in households, in private households, and this is up from 1 in 1,340. And we also know that the R value increased in England up to 0.9, between 0.9 and 1.1, where it was previously 0.8. Between 0.8 and 1. Now, while there is definitely good news with the vaccination programme, and it's really welcome to hear, governments and experts will be keeping a close eye on potential increases in cases.
OK, Aisha, thank you. Well, let's look at the daily COVID numbers now. And there have been 2,829 new cases and 9 more deaths have been reported. That takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test to 127,710. Another 268,251 people have received their first vaccination and 420,312 their second. In total, 59.18 million jabs have now been administered across the UK. President Biden says a two-state solution is now the only answer to resolving the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. Speaking at the White House, he said he was praying the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds.
There is no shift in my commitment to the security of Israel, period. No shift, not at all. But I tell you what, there is a shift in. The shift is that we still need a two-state solution. It is the only answer. And I'm prepared to put together, and I'm going to attempt to put together, a major package with other nations who share our view to rebuild the homes and without re-engaging, without providing Hamas the opportunity to rebuild their weapon systems, rebuild the Gaza, rebuild Gaza. And they need the help, and I'm committed to get that done.
After 11 days of conflict, the ceasefire is holding and the borders of Gaza have reopened. Our correspondent Mark Stone was amongst those returning and spoke to people mourning their dead.
It's only an hour and a bit's drive from Jerusalem down to Gaza. Through an Israeli checkpoint, which they have now opened after 11 days, and with multiple vehicle changes, it is a journey into a different world. The damage of the past 2 weeks of bombings is quickly clear. And so too is the relief of the people here. They can finally emerge into streets which are safe. No one here knows why this building was hit. A residential block in the neighborhood of Bet Hanun. But inside, celebrating Eid last week, were 2 families. Among them, Bilal, Miriam, Yamin, Yusuf, and in the middle, Maria. 10 people are now dead. They were all women and children. Nearby, a wake. The ceasefire has allowed for people to gather, to mourn. Maria survived that night with her father, Ala Abu Hatib. They are the only 2 from the family still alive.
وعايشة الصدمة يعني لحتى الآن ولا كلمة بتتكلمش من كتر الصدمة والهول يعني هي كانت في الطابق الثالث فجأة لقيناها تحت بنت لحتى الآن مصدومة مش قادرة تحكي ولا كلمة لحتى الآن يعني حتى بتكلم معها إيش اسمك إيش كذا بتضلها ساكتة بتقدرش تحكي.
The Israeli military insist that this wasn't them. They say a Hamas rocket fell short and that in time they will prove it. But then, no Hamas rockets which have hit Israel have caused anything like this damage. We move on through the narrow streets and past more wakes for a meeting with a Hamas official. Dr. Basim Naim is a surgeon by training, but speaks for Hamas and defends its actions.
Any people under occupation, based on the international law, have all the right to defend themselves by all feasible means they have.
Not by firing rockets from a civilian population?
I have said it clearly. Palestinians, as an occupied people, have the right to defend themselves by all feasible means, including armed resistance. But when it comes To civilians, we have said it many times. We are ready to stop firing rockets or attacking civilians if the Israelis stop attacking our people.
Would you sit down with an Israeli to talk this through?
Why to sit with him? My demands are clear. I don't need to sit with him. We have achieved a lot without sitting with each other.
Back in Beit Hanun, more friends of the Abu Hatibs offer their support. One family, just 2 people now, but a pain shared. Mark Stone, Sky News in Gaza.
Let's take a look now at some of the morning's other news for you.
As long as you're with me, I'll never get cold. Day and night, through darkness and light, I'll never worry when you're by my side.
And this is the UK's entry for tonight's Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam. The song is called Embers and is performed by James Newman. He's hoping to improve on the competition from that 2019 when the UK came last.
I think it's kind of scary, but also exciting because I'm like building up to it, doing loads of practice, loads of rehearsals, loads of singing lessons. I feel like I'm like training for like a boxing match or something. So hopefully, fingers crossed, when I get on the stage, I've done everything I can to be the best that I can.
The Glastonbury Festival will return with a live stream event tonight featuring some of the biggest names in music. Acts including Haim, Coldplay and Damon Albarn will perform at Worthy Farm in Somerset. Experts from the Royal Botanic Gardens have begun work on a project to find natural solutions to current environmental problems. They want to create a so-called living laboratory, which not only looks good, but also helps to absorb carbon. Shingi Mararike reports.
The British countryside, something many have become more familiar with than ever over the past year. Places like Kew Wakehurst, which is home to 500 acres of woodland, flora and fauna, have provided us with much needed relief. But today, it becomes even more than that. These meadows are now the backdrop for a new living laboratory, exploring the benefits of a biodiverse British landscape. Scientists here are hopeful that the idea will grow into more than just a research project. They want it to change the way policymakers, landowners and conservation bodies approach the environment.
We have been very lucky that we've spent a lot of time over many, many years enriching this landscape, really asking of every habitat, what's the best range of species that we can create? What's the best way that we can care for this estate? We know it's a good landscape, but we now want to prove it. So we want to use Kew Science's amazing research skills to start to build evidence for why a biodiverse landscape like this matters.
From today, Kew scientists will study this patchwork of fields and flowers, focusing on 4 pillars of research: carbon, pollination, hydrology and human well-being. Starting from the ground up, they want to branch out and address the big question.
Everybody wants to know whether the landscape has a role in absorbing carbon. Can it help us to get to this net zero target by 2050? We know that planting trees is important for absorbing carbon, but we also think that really well-managed, stable long-term landscapes are good for locking carbon up.
It's not just about woodlands and plants. Here at the Living Laboratory in Kew Wakehurst, researchers are also interested in the importance of insects in ensuring that we live in a biodiverse landscape.
If we don't have enough insects, not just the ones that control pests in our crops or not just the ones that pollinate our crops, if we don't have enough insects, we won't have the birds. We won't have all of those parts of the food chain that enable us to maintain a rich biodiversity.
The work here won't just preserve invertebrates and the slightly larger members of the food chain. One of the biggest benefits of taking care of our landscape is the role doing this plays in taking care of ourselves. Shingi Mararike, Sky News, Wakehurst.
And a reminder that you can watch the Sky News Daily Climate Show. That's at 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. every weekday. Time now to take a look at the actual weather for you with Kirsty, and I can see out the window. It's not great.
It's better than yesterday.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Or it will be in a little bit. So yes, the forecast is somewhat better as we go through the rest of the weekend. Today, for many of us, will be the best day. There is more wet and windy weather to come on Sunday, but a heads up for further ahead of that, it is going to settle down. Hang on in there. I'll bring you the details.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Yesterday's weather was pretty grim, rather wet and very windy. Now that windy weather is eventually clearing away. Still a risk of gales for eastern coast as we go through the morning, but it is improving. And the cloudy skies to start the day across much of England and Wales, well, that cloud will thin and break as well. The rain lingering for a time across the far east and far south, but also becoming drier. We have already got some brighter skies across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland. A few showers mixed in with that, but the brighter showery weather will start to extend its way further east through the rest of the day, and where you get the sunshine it might actually feel a little bit more like spring. Temperatures peaking 11 to maybe 14 degrees, so it's still just below the average. The cloudy skies may cling on for a time across East Anglia, really into the afternoon, but elsewhere it's sunny spells and scattered showers, and with lighter winds it will feel warmer than yesterday. Through the night tonight it'll be a bit chilly where we have clear skies, but we've got wet and windy weather moving in from the west through tomorrow, so tomorrow another wetter and windier one.
More now on our top story and the fallout from the Dyson report into the BBC interview with Princess Diana. Less than 2 years after she spoke to Martin Bashir, Princess Diana lost her life, and Prince William has now said he believes the interview contributed to his mother's paranoia and isolation. A friend of Diana's has told Sky News while the interview was contrived, the princess wanted to do it. Ivor Bennett reports.
For Diana, the life of a princess meant a life in front of the lens. Cameras followed her wherever she went. By day, it was on the roadside. By night, on the red carpet. Publicity that ultimately became too much.
I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
Simone Simmons was a friend of Diana's and was with her when she arranged to speak to Martin Bashir. But she says the interview that was recorded was not the one that was agreed.
She was so excited. He's going to do a documentary about my charities and all the good work. She had wanted to do some form of an interview to get back at Charles, but not one that was so contrived to make her totally paranoid.
To escape her marriage and the media glare, Diana spent much of her time at Kensington Palace, but it served as both her refuge and her prison.
Diana's paranoia was evident well before she agreed to do the Panorama interview, and it got to the point where, when a new fire alarm was being installed here, according to her private secretary at the time, Diana was convinced it was actually the building being bugged.
The interview with the BBC wasn't the first time Diana told her story. Many of its revelations had already appeared in print. In a book that was written, it was later revealed with her help, but it still contained moments that shocked even those who knew her.
When she said in terms, my husband, Prince Charles, isn't fit to be king, and she questioned his wish to be king, at that moment, you know, in an earlier age, that's what they call lèse-majesté. I almost heard the axes being sharpened in the background.
After a fairy tale beginning, her life in the spotlight slowly unravelled. A public persona adored the world over, but in private, this was someone who felt increasingly isolated and alone. Those vulnerabilities now laid bare once again. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
The US President Joe Biden says a two-state solution is the only answer to resolving the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. Earlier, we heard from residents of Gaza who say they fear conflict will return one day. Those same worries are present in Israeli communities on the border. Our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, reports from Ashdod.
Families here didn't have time to race to a communal shelter before the rocket struck last Monday.
I keep having flashes that what if the bomb hit that side? If it hit that side, we wouldn't be alive for sure.
Do you feel like a little bit calmer today because there's no sirens?
Yeah, sure. I feel calmer today, but I'm concerned about the future because today is okay, but I have no idea what's going to happen next year.
No one in this Jewish neighbourhood in southern Israel was killed, but everyone's shaken. Katia told me how she protected her 2 young daughters.
Yeah, and I was just lying on top of them.
A neighbour helped rescue them.
They didn't speak. Only in the hospital when the paramedics were treating us, that's where they started to speak a little bit.
1 floor down, more evidence of trauma.
The Gorensteins were at home when the blast happened, and you can see it's absolutely devastated their apartment. Windows smashed in, cupboards hanging off the wall, rubble on the floor, and they say, well, they're relieved that the ceasefire has been called. Like many people here, they just wonder how long it's going to last.
The damage here, while bad, is incomparable with the scenes in Gaza. But this is still a community reeling. The threat of Palestinian rocket fire forced this vet at a nearby kibbutz to close for the first time in years of on-off conflict. Today's her first day back. She thinks Israel's airstrikes were worthwhile to deter Hamas, though she's also no fan of her own Prime Minister.
I think it's time for him to go. It's been too long already, and I think that we have to have a change here. We need to do the change. It's enough.
Lily says the whole country now needs to mend, Arabs and Jews.
It damaged us, but it's like a wound, and we will heal, and maybe it will make us stronger. People want to say that we live together, people that do live in cooperation, and want to shout it out and to say there is a different way, we can do it differently together. And I hope the silent voices will rise more and more.
If not, the wounds on both sides will only worsen. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Ashdod.
Earlier this week, we brought you a report from inside an eating disorder unit showing the reality of an illness which is affecting more and more young people during the pandemic. For those who are coming through treatment, moving on can be filled with hope, but also apprehension. Sky's Nick Martin spoke to one teenager who spent months in hospital. This is Melissa's story, and just to warn you, there are references to eating disorders and feeding through the nose in this report.
This is the room where I spent quite a few months.
Melissa has mixed feelings about being here. It's both a place of hurt and healing, and not always in equal measure.
I definitely remember lying on that bed every single night and just wishing I was at home in my own bed with my own family and not having to dread waking up the next morning.
She's a patient on this ward for children and adolescents, and she's being treated for the eating disorder anorexia nervosa.
Everyone around you just wants you to be safe and wants to help, but that is the last thing in that moment that you want.
What are the pressures that make things more difficult for you, do you think?
Although I do love being in college, I think that's definitely a big pressure. The same with like friends and peer groups. I think although that is a good thing, I think it is still another big pressure. It's another thing to sort of perform to, I suppose.
And so the paradox of that is the things that you actually like are on the other side of the coin, the things that you actually hate at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Eating disorder referrals have doubled during the pandemic. And alongside the care and compassion here, there is a stark reality that nurses often have to feed patients via a tube just to keep them alive.
I think it's genuinely up there with one of the worst things I've ever had to go through. Physically, it's such an awful feeling. And then obviously as well, it's really horrible just having that sort of happening to you, and you know at the same time that you can't control it or stop it. And I think it gets to a point where I think I can definitely remember sitting there having that done to me and thinking like, how did it actually get to this?
It's a very, very cruel illness. To see your daughter, your young daughter, as a child, as she still is a child, but as a young child, sobbing her heart out because she knows she's got to eat that meal, and you're sitting there sort of forcing her into it And it is horrible, sorry. It is really horrible. You know she's got to do it. You've got to make her do it, and you're making her do something that is really, really awful for her. And you're doing it for all the right reasons, and I think deep down she knows that. But it's utterly heartbreaking to see. It really is.
Do you think that they saved your life in this room?
I think, yeah, looking back on it now, I think definitely. Yeah. I think there definitely are negatives and drawbacks to it, but I think it does save lives. It is really important, and I've met some amazing people along the way, and I don't want that to go unmissed alongside it.
Do you want to get better?
I think in principle I do, but I think it's putting that into action that I struggle with.
So for me it feels like a happy ending for you, because I've journeyed through since your time here.
There is hope here. Melissa is being discharged, which means she can go home. But the family have been here before.
So there's always that sort of worry at the back of my mind as to how are we going to manage this? Will this be the time she does manage to stay out?
And I was looking through some work that you completed for me, and I kind of talked a bit about how home is so lovely and safe for you. And it makes me feel happy that discharge has come and you're going.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye. Bye. Bye.
For Melissa, this is a new start, and everyone here hopes she can continue to get better. But the pandemic has revealed that many more youngsters will need this kind of treatment, and sadly their journey is just beginning. Nick Martin, Sky News.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues in that report, you can contact the Samaritans on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. It is time now to take a look at the weather for you with Kirsty.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. After yesterday's very wet and unseasonably windy weather, we are looking at slightly better conditions for the weekend, although not completely dry, unfortunately. But the wind has eased a lot. Still a small risk of coastal gales in the far east, but for many it is a less windy start to the day. A little bit grey and damp across parts of England and Wales, but the rain will start to ease in the east and the south. Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland, sunshine and showers here, and that showery mix will start to extend its way across England and Wales as we go through the rest of the day. Temperatures are still a little bit below the average, but feeling more like spring where you get the sunshine. Although saying that, it will take some time for the brighter skies to get all the way over towards parts of East Anglia. Where we have the clear skies tonight, it will be a rather chilly one. A few showers around the coast and then this band of rain coming in across Ireland into Northern Ireland by the end of the night. So wetter and windier weather moving its way eastwards during the day on Sunday, but some bright weather further north and east for much of the day.
With us this morning to take us through the newspapers now, the broadcaster and journalist Badisha, and Senior Fellow from the Policy Exchange, Calvin Robinson. Welcome to you both. Good morning. Starting with you, first of all, Badisha, you've had a look at the Times front page and Prince Harry pictured there, and this story really about the pain that he's felt ever since the death of his mother. Very, very sad, isn't it?
It's very sad. It's incredibly revelatory. So this is all based on Prince Harry and the great broadcaster Oprah's new series all about mental health. It's called The Me You Can't See. It's a long, very lavish In Conversations series. And Prince Harry opens up in a way that he had done prior to this in his original Oprah interview, but he gives even more details. He talks about how following the death of his mother, Diana, in 1997, he self-medicated with drink and drugs, and how he drank as much on a Saturday night or a Friday night as he had during the week, and about how his grief was exacerbated by the paparazzi, and he felt that the same system, the same people, the same tactics were being used against his wife, Meghan Markle, as they had been against his mother, Diana. Read all the details online. There's been lots of leaking and splurging about this. The reason I brought this up is because it ties together a few different things, talking about mental health, talking about grief and family dynamics, talking about the unique, strange position of being a prince, where he complains about having his game face on and having to say yes and be the yes man of the family, and talking about old structures. So not just the press and the paparazzi, but also the entire royal family. Got to be frank, I'm not 100% sure that saying all of this stuff is going to somehow resolve his relationships with his family, but lots of details there and lots of interesting, very big issues at the moment that we're all talking about. And maybe it takes someone of the stature of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and Oprah Winfrey to bring these debates into the mainstream.
Calvin, it's only going to make things worse in terms of the relationship with his family, isn't it?
It's outrageous, isn't it? So much for wanting extra privacy. We've heard stories already that Prince Harry is saying Archie's first words were Grandma Diana. It's all very crass. It seems to be like he's cashing in on his poor late mother's name. I'm very sad to see all of this.
Or is he just being open about his experience with his mental health and what he's been through?
After what we saw with the last Oprah interview, that's not. I don't think that's the case. It looks to me like they're launching a US career. It's very crass. It's not pleasant to see. Go to therapy privately, sure, but don't do it on national television or international television for the world to see. And shaming his family in this way, the stories he's bringing up about his family, very personal, very intimate, very private.
Or possibly part of his healing, you could see it that way. Let's look at The Guardian, staying with the royals, and they're talking about, the furore now over that interview that Diana gave to Martin Bashir and the responsibilities of the BBC, although from the tone of this article, it's saying that the interview is going to be used as a weapon to be used against the BBC now.
Absolutely, and rightly so. This is the lead story, of course, in The Guardian. This is a big story right here. The former chair of the BBC Trust is warning about this feeding frenzy. And of course there should be a feeding frenzy on the BBC. Here we had Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, tricked into an interview with lies, fake documents, fraud, outright manipulated by the BBC, and it was covered up for years. After complaints at the time and complaints up until today, it was all swept under the carpet. It's out of order. It's outrageous. Any other time period, if this was happening to the royal family, that would have been classed as treason. So it's completely appropriate for Ofcom to be investigating this, and it's completely appropriate for ministers, government ministers, to be looking at how the BBC is governed. I would say I really thought His Royal Highness the Prince William gave a real classy speech full of integrity. He showed himself to be a future king in his statement. That was fantastic to see.
What would you say to those who've openly said, and we've spoken to one of Princess Diana's friends, that she would have done an interview anyway, and she wanted to do the interview even if it hadn't been with the BBC?
Oh, I'm sure she would, but she would have answered the questions probably in a very different way. When you're shown information that you think the BBC already has, when the interviewer has these so-called scoops on you, you're going to answer the questions in a very different way than you would otherwise. You'd probably protect yourself and protect your family a little bit more if you thought that they didn't know certain things. So I think she was manipulated, and it was fraud. It was outright fraud. That she was shown bank statements that were made up by people at the BBC. It's outrageous what happened, and we need to really investigate it, make sure that this never happens again. And the BBC should pay a costly price for it.
Yeah, it is under the microscope, to say the least, at the moment. Badisha, to the eye, and we're all sort of thinking about the summer months, will we be able to go abroad or not? Some people deciding not to, but for those who have children and potentially take them abroad, the issues with quarantining when they get back and what excuse is given to the school and whether all of that should be allowed.
Yeah, I'm not sure it quite rises to the height of treason, this particular story, and I'm also not sure it quite feels very summery yet. So we might be thinking about it, but we're not sure. So the issue is that a country like Spain is one of the most visited hotspots for UK travellers. We visit there in our millions every single year. Now, Spain is on the amber list. That means that when you go, you need to come back and quarantine for 10 days afterwards. This makes a problem because if you do that, it means that your kids will not be in school for the start of the next bit of the term. The government doesn't want parents to have their kids out of school without the head teacher's permission. There are fines put in place on a sort of parking fine system. So 60 quid if you pay up immediately, 120 if you desist. At the same time, however, they don't want parents to lie about travelling and put their kids back in school after the holiday without quarantining, because that's not safe. So what we do know is that a few leaky little moles in the government have been saying that they don't really want to undermine the quarantine system by forcing parents to pay fines. We're going to go ahead as if it's okay just about to visit the Amber List countries. Spain is accepting tourists, and then to try and quarantine, but somehow not make the parents or the teachers, the head teachers, look like the bad guys in this. So they're trying to square the circle around holiday and quarantining. But I have to be frank, I don't think that you're going to have to pay a fine if you do indeed go on holidays. You know my position on the pandemic. I'm very orthodox. I like to follow the rules. Having said that, that desire amongst families to go on holidays is completely and utterly understandable by this stage, because we're a year and 2 months into it. So I do understand all of these drives, but also the medics' concerns. We can't have this pandemic start growing again.
No. But do you think that even if there were fines to be imposed, that some parents would just consider it part of the holiday cost?
I think that if you're privileged in the sense that you can afford all of that in terms of time and money, there certainly will be families who think about that. One of the proposals that's been put forward by government advisors is to say, OK, you know how we did it in the education system at the beginning of the pandemic? We used remote learning. We had lots of tools and resources online. Maybe that's a way of bridging the gap so that you don't have kids basically quarantining at home with absolutely nothing to do when term time and all of their friends are at school. That's the solution that's being suggested.
Calvin, very quickly, we're running out of time. Sorry about that. The Telegraph, in about 50 seconds, tell me about this story to do with a new law to fight phone scammers.
Absolutely. So the police are encouraging the government and phone companies to take more responsibility. Over this pandemic, we've seen so many more of these phone scammers. What they can do is they can clone numbers and send text messages that appear to be from your bank or appear to be from the Royal Mail and say, you know, you've got a failed delivery. Could you please click this link to pay £2 to receive your parcel? Things like that. They're preying on the vulnerable, and we need to stamp it out. In order to do that, the government, the police and the phone companies need to work together to ensure that these horrible scammers stop preying on vulnerable people and stop faking phone calls and text messages in order to scam people of their hard-earned cash.
Yeah, it is annoying. We've all got those texts, haven't we? Calvin and Badisha, thank you so much.